In a week, I booked like 35 fashion shows. It was crazy. They put me as it was Vogue's top 100 upcoming models. It just happened like super, super fast.
You were in deep and you were working as like a practitioner, huh? Like a new age.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had clients all over the world. That like phone clients and it was real gifts. I was not making them up gifts of quote healing, false gifts of healing. I was
Wow.
working as an energy master, as a healing practitioner. I was doing mediumship.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome today to a very exciting interview slash episode with Lee, which do we say your name online? Do we say Lee Denono? Do we say Little House in the Mountain?
That's fine.
One.
Either way.
Hi Lee, welcome to my channel. So
this is really, really exciting. I've been wanting to chat with you for a long time.
I know. Lee and I have been friends now for the last couple of years. Lee has an amazing channel that, I've obviously been watching for a few years. That's how we connected in the first place. And part of why I wanted to talk to Lee today, besides the fact that she's an amazing person and you've really just inspired me and encouraged me a lot over the years in a lot of different ways. But part of the reason why Lee came to my mind today, and this is what we're going to be talking about, is just the transformation I have seen in your life in the period of time that I've known you. Part of what's amazing about Lee's transformation that she's had online is, not only seeing that, but that I know a little bit from your story that your transformation over a longer period of time has actually been much more like dramatic. And I've always just thought it's amazing seeing what God does to people's hearts and how he changes us and sanctifies us and refines us and guides us where he wants us to go. And you just came to my mind in terms of wanting to have this conversation about these things. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today about all of this because, you're like me in the sense that a lot of people talk about us online. People have opinions about our stories and our history. And I just love you. I just love the interactions we've gotten to have. And so I'm excited to hear your story today and for people to hear your journey and everything that's unfolded. So I don't know if you want to say anything before we jump in, so I just don't start throwing questions at you, but that was my little intro.
Well, I love you too. And it is amazing because sometimes I think back on my story and it's almost weird for me to see how dramatically I've changed because it's not something that I could have done myself or that I would have done myself. And so when I look back and I'm like, it almost seems like I am like thinking about someone else's life. That's how deep the transformation has gone. And it doesn't even feel like me when I think back on my past, and just to watch what God is capable of doing and how he did it, it just gives glory to him because it's not something I was capable of doing on my own. Yeah.
And part of what I love about that and about you in general and your transformation, I guess, is that you're proud of it. I don't quite know how to word that. You're not like ashamed of it. You're not hiding it. You're not like, oh, this is just who I am. You're open about the fact that God has radically changed you and your heart and your worldview and just who you are. And I think that's really cool because I think sometimes, like for myself, the changes that happen, it can be embarrassing to look back. Like, I don't even want to talk about that. That's not me,
Well, it's cringy.
Yeah,
it's cringy sometimes. It's like I hear stuff, I look back on stuff and I'm like, that is super cringy.
Cringy is a good word, but you work past the cringe. You're not hiding the transformation.
We have to work past the cringe because that's where the testimony is.
Yes.
And it's by, the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony that we overcome the enemy. So you have to like push past that shame that the enemy wants you to have about your past. You have to push past those cringy feelings and wanting to hide it and let God shine through the testimony.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you're a living example of that. And it's been really cool to watch. So, okay. I was trying to decide where the beginning really is, because in my notes, the beginning, which is not the beginning, but that was where I had started, was backing up to kind of your life in the city, because you lived in New York City working as a model for a few years, right?
I lived right outside the city. I
Right
could
outside the
see it
city.
from my apartment, but I never lived actually in the city. But yeah, I was going in and out of there almost every day.
Yeah, so that was your life, like the city life. And really you were working. And like I said, I know this isn't the beginning. So if we want to touch earlier, we can. Like I was telling Dan last night, just talking about your transformation, I was saying, man, it sounds so radical, but also you were exposed to Christianity through your family. It was something that you kind of, I don't want to say you turned away from God, but you chose a different path in your early
Correct.
adult years, right?
Yes. Mhm.
So you were exposed to Christianity, you ended up stepping away and then living in kind of right outside the city, working as a model. So how did you get into modeling?
You know, I think, just to backtrack one step, I think I was exposed to religion.
Mm,
I was There was a little bit of mixing of spirituality
mm,
in our house, like mixing of, we went to church and then there was mixing of some new age spirituality. And so it was just kind of, I was exposed to spirituality, I was exposed to religion, I was exposed to God. I always believed in God since I was
mm,
just forever. I always did. That was never in question, but it was, um, I was never really exposed to people that seemed born again and genuine in their walk. So Christianity, Jesus was real to me, but real to me on a logical level, not
mm,
on a personal level.
mm,
And then, you know, that over time, as I got really deep into the new age, Jesus became, I knew he was, I believed he was the son of God, but he really got mixed in with a lot of the other new age ascended masters. And that's where things got really dark.
mm.
But that all kind of, yeah, that all coincided during my time in the city, during my time modeling.
You mean
I,
step of like new age,
oh
think
yeah,
this is like an ascended master, that all really kind of culminated when you were in the city.
it got worse because when you're in an industry like that, um, there's a whole lot of a whole lot of darkness, and you become desensitized to it. And
Mm.
that's why people will ask me a lot of times, should I let my kid get into the entertainment industry? And I'm always like, run for your life,
Oh,
because
it's
it
dark.
is so, I watch so many innocent, sweet young girls come up from the South, from nice little Christian families. You know, they were I mean, I was older at the time. I started when I was 18 or 19. These girls were coming up at 14, 15 years old. And
Wow.
they always started out by saying, I'll never do this and I'll never do that. And they had their boundaries, and those boundaries always were gone within a year, because like the scripture says, we sear our conscience,
Yeah.
and we just do it little bit at a time. We deafen the voice of the Holy Spirit. And over time, you start to make justifications for things, and you're surrounded by so many people who are, even though I met some very lovely people in the industry, you're surrounded by people who spiritually are dark. And so eventually that is going to affect you, and it's going to change you, and it's going to change your worldview. It's like bad company corrupts good character.
Mhm. Yeah. So so you were around 18, 19, you were working with girls that would come up at like 14. That's
13 years old,
that
13,
is
14.
wild. So when you say like new age stuff kind of started getting mixed in, do you know who I'm sure you do, Doreen Virtue is?
Oh yeah. I had all her stuff. I had every book, every angel card deck. Oh yeah. I
Wow.
had the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay, so then that answers my question. I was gonna say if you were kind of in a similar vein as her, but you were following along.
Oh,
Following.
absolutely.
Okay.
She was the number one best-selling new age author, like at that time when I was really in it,
Wow.
which is incredible to see her.
Right?
I mean, so
Right.
in it to win it with the Lord, because I mean, it's trippy for me because she was like the new age guru. I
That is
mean,
so wild. Yeah. So to any of you that don't know, it's exactly what she just said. Doreen Virtue, it was like a new age guru, had the angel
Oh,
cards, wrote all these books. And now fast forward, if you haven't picked up on what we're saying, she is a born again believer. And she has a channel where she kind of talks about and points out areas within the world where like, hey, this is new age. Look at what's going on here. This is new age. Like she'll interview people that were formerly in witchcraft. And I think her work is really awesome. I've watched quite a few of her videos and I really appreciate it. So you were deep into her. You started this around 18, 19. What did your modeling journey look like? How long were you in that field? What were some maybe like big experiences that stuck out to you? I mean, that's kind of a broad question, but I'm interested
yeah.
to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was in it for 12 years.
Wow.
And I worked mostly in the city, but I did some work in Chicago. I did a trip to Paris. So I was really in the heart of high fashion modeling,
Mm,
and you see a lot of things,
mm,
things that I hadn't been exposed to previously. And again, you get desensitized to seeing these things, but just a few examples. I remember going one time to this designer's home, and she was having like a fitting there at her home. She's sitting on the floor with other people, and they're doing this like weird satanic witchcraft, like
oh,
trying to manifest. A lot of people in the industry are into manifestation, and you're naming and claiming all of that, not from a Christian point of view, but
yeah.
and they're just sitting there with like stuff on the floor in these circles. And I remember, because I had a history with Christ,
Huh.
but I wasn't born again yet, but like I knew who Jesus was. And so it was like, it was always this thing where when I saw stuff like that, I, it was always this thing of like, that's not right,
Yeah. You had
but
a
you
little,
kind of have to ignore it because you don't want to offend these people, right? Because these are the people pulling all the strings. But when I first got into the industry, my first season in the industry, I got into it was like one of the top. I'm not saying these things to brag. I'm just saying these things
yeah.
to show you what happened.
Well, and side note, to pause you, this is exactly what I want, because I remember when I first started figuring out like what your past was and where you came from. I had said that to Dan. I'm like, oh, she's not like a model, like no offense, but like these agencies that would pop up where like you pay them for headshots and then you never work.
No.
I was like, oh, she was like a legitimate working high fashion model. So none of it's from bragging. I wanted to hear it's part of the transformation.
Yeah, it's just the journey. So it was like one of the top. It was just so random. I had a friend basically dare me to go to a modeling agency. She was like, just go. So I went. It was I'm like, well, if I'm going to go, I'm just going to go to one of the top 5 in New York, and just, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like they say something nasty and they send you home, right? So I walked in. I'm like, I just picked one of the top 5 on that I could find, and went in there, and they said, they made me turn around a few times and do this and do that. And they're like, okay, we're going to send you out to a few of our clients today.
What?
So that was like the beginning. Started really quick. I booked those 3 jobs that day. They signed me.
What?
And that now this is where God intervened right at the beginning, because I had already stepped outside his will. This is
Yeah.
my opinion on what happened. Me going into the industry was already like, he probably didn't want that. So this is how he intervened right away. So I got into this top 5 agency, started booking right away. It was right before Fashion Week in the fall.
Okay.
And I booked like in a week, I booked like 35 fashion shows. It was crazy. I
Wow.
was like, yes, they put me as it was Vogue's top 100 upcoming models. It just happened like super, super fast, like really
How
fast.
wild is that?
So I booked tons of shows with very well-known designers. And all of a sudden one day I'm walking downtown to one of my go-sees, and I feel this pain in my chest, like crazy pain in my chest, to the point where I had to sit down on the sidewalk. And New York City, people just step over your body. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I somehow managed to get myself across the street to the Starbucks, called my daddy, picked me up, brought me to the hospital. out of nowhere, I had a lung collapse.
What?
My lung collapsed. Like there was no reason for it. Right. Well, I didn't think there was any reason for it at the time. But I
Wow.
was they were getting ready to send me off to Paris, Milan. They were getting ready to send me everywhere. And I could not do that first fashion week because I had to get, like, I had a chest tube. It was a whole thing. But the summary of it is that I was able to do the next fashion week, but because I had to cancel all of those things that I booked, people are not merciful in the
Dude,
modeling industry.
no, they're not merciful in the entertainment industry.
There's no grace.
No.
There's no grace. And so it was like, we're not working with you again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
They don't care if you're dying. They don't care like what it is.
It
right.
really is wild. It's like pick up and just keep going. Come on.
I realized something when I left the industry was that a lot of these people only care about you when you have something they want.
Yes.
And that's it. And then as soon as you're not valuable to them anymore, you're just suddenly not their friend. Right.
Yes. Yes.
So the Lord intervened. He let that happen. I know that now because I would have been off in Europe. I would have had a huge career, and I still had a decent career. I had 12 years. I did Project Runway. I worked with, I won't mention people's names, but I still had a big career.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the career I would have had if he hadn't done that.
Your lungs not collapsed.
Correct.
Wow.
And yeah, so he intervened.
Oh, that's
right away. Yeah. So anyway, so I went on to do, like I said, I worked with the top designers in the city. Like I said, I worked with an agency in Chicago. I did go to work with this specific designer who I did a lot of work for in Paris. And I did New York Fashion Week every season they had it.
Wow.
And then towards the end of the 12 years was around when I got born again. And
I think you've talked about this, having an encounter. I'm sorry, go on. I'm remembering when I think I saw a video of you talking about having an encounter with the Lord, like in your bathroom on the floor. Am I making that up?
No, it was face down on the floor. This was right around that time. I was getting out of a very abusive relationship. I was in a horrendous relationship where I was abused on every level. And it was just a dark time for me. I was super deep in the new age, which comes off at first as very love and light.
Yeah.
I had gotten so deep in it to the point where I was at the point where they were starting, the spirits were starting to torment me in my dreams. So I was getting out of this super abusive relationship that was very dark. I was being tormented with night terrors by these spirits that I had let into my life in my dreams. And I had nothing at that point. Like, from this abusive relationship, like everything I had almost financially was taken from. So like, it was a very low moment. But again, the Lord allowed that because he had to get me to a point. He had to allow the consequences of my choices outside of him to occur so that I would end up on my face. That he had to allow it. So I just remember I woke up from a night terror. I had my little poodle in bed with me, and he would like lick my face when I would have a night terror.
Oh.
I woke up and went into the bathroom, splashed my face, went out into, it was just, I had a little apartment at the time because that's where I had moved into temporarily. And I felt this crushing hopelessness. It was crushing. It was like the enemy was trying to crush me. And I think it's because he knew that I was about to turn to God. I don't know how it all works, but he was literally trying to crush me. And all of a sudden, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's like I just felt this glimpse, and I can only call it a glimpse of the presence of the I Am. It was like any bit of the new age where you think you're having a spiritual experience, or you're experiencing power, you're experiencing God or universe. Everything failed in comparison. This was like you were in the presence of such holiness and I just couldn't even lift my head up. It's not like I saw anything. It was just, I put my face down on the floor because I didn't even feel like I could lift my face up in this. And that presence took the crushing feeling of hopelessness out of the room like that. It just like left. And I just had my face on the floor and just started to weep, just weep, because it was the first time in my life that I understood sin.
Wow.
So I had always understood, I knew who Jesus was. I understood all the aspects of the gospel except for sin.
Isn't that amazing?
And what that really meant. I didn't really understand what sin and repentance was. I understood the good parts about Jesus. I just did not understand that sin thing. And it hit me that this sin, the weight of it hit me, how it had separated me from this holy God. It hit me so hard, and I just came undone. And within a year from there, it was a little bit slow, but he slowly just took me out of the industry.
You were in deep, and you were working as like a practitioner, huh? Like a new age.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had clients all over the world. Like phone clients. I had clients in high-end communities, so and it was real gifts. I was not making them up. I had developed real spiritual gifts of quote healing, false gifts of healing. Wow. I was working as an energy master, as a healing practitioner. I was doing mediumship.
Whoa.
Yeah. So he took me out of that and modeling at the same time. So then it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with my life now? Right. Because
over the course of the next year, he took you
out. Oh yeah, both things. He took me all the clients I had to let go of, plus all the clients in the modeling industry. So it was a total stripping of everything that had become who I was. And that was a really, really hard time. It wasn't the story of like, you're going to come to Jesus and everything's going to be like rainbows and butterflies. It wasn't like that. It was a stripping. He had to tear the whole house down to the foundation. The whole thing had to come down.
Okay, so this moment in the bathroom, was it literally out of nowhere? Like you had woken up from your night terror and it happened? Was there anything that had led up to that? Had anyone mentioned anything? Had you been to a church service? Or was it like he just reached down out of nowhere and?
No, it was just kind of sudden.
Wow.
I think I had probably been starting to think about like what was the purpose of my life at that point.
Yeah.
So he was planting thoughts in my head, but actually after that moment was when I started making myself go back to church. So it was after that I started going back to church. But before that, I hadn't been attending for a little while. I went to a very liberal church for a period of time for years before that. I was in small groups. People knew I did mediumship and energy work, and no one ever said anything about it.
Isn't that the most wild part about what can be Christianity in the big cities?
They knew I was posing in underwear. They knew that I was, doing these mystical things. And like, no one ever was like, hey, you want to look at the scripture about that? Like,
hey, you want to? Yeah, I definitely figured out in the last couple of years with everything that unfolded. I started to see more of the extent to which, I don't know, you could say sin, the world, the left, like however you want to word it, I started to see in the last few years, like, oh man, especially in the cities, like it really works its way into churches. So that's really amazing that no one had ever said anything.
Nope.
So over the next year, wait. See, now I'm getting confused because you said you were in a church that whole time, but then you said
not the whole time. Part of it, I was in a very liberal church while I was still in the new age and the modeling industry. I never felt convicted, not a one time while I was in that church. I just didn't. And no one ever, actually one person from my past reached out to me and said, I'm not sure this is kosher. But no one from the church I was going to did.
Interesting. So after you had this encounter with the Lord, did you feel like I need to change churches? Did you just like, I got to start visiting other places, or how?
I didn't know what to do. So I went to a different like campus location that the church had. And I went to like the night services a couple times because I just thought I just need to dip my toesies back in like, the church water here. But actually it's funny because that's where I met. So James at the time, he had two churches he went to. So he went there on the Wednesday nights for more just to, fellowship.
Okay.
And then he had a different church that was real more conservative and Bible based that he went to Sundays. So I actually met him there at that Wednesday night church.
That was going to be my next question, was when you met. So it was right after this. You're like, okay, I got to dip my toes. I'm gonna go to a different campus.
Yeah.
And you end up sitting like in front of James, right?
Well, the funny part is that week I said, because I had gotten myself into so many bad relationships. Like I was addicted to male attention, which the industry will do to you too.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
People looking at you.
Yeah.
And I was addicted to seducing them and getting them. I'm just being honest. It's horrifying. I'm not proud of it.
Yeah.
But I was addicted to getting them to fall in love with me.
Yeah.
It's absolutely vile. But I remember saying to the Lord, I'm like, I don't care if I'm single for 20 more years, 30, forever. I never want to do this again, unless it's who you want me to be with. And then a week later, I met James. I was ready.
I just got chills. How wild is that?
I was ready to commit myself to my 30-year celibacy and everything.
Yeah.
So he popped up. So I saw him for the first time that night. And then the next week I saw him again. Oh, the next week when I went in, every seat in the entire church was taken, but the one in front of him.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I sat in it. And then when the pastor was like, turn around and greet the people around you, I just froze like a dork. I was like, oh, because for
the next 30 years.
I'm like, don't turn around, the cute guys back there. Just don't.
And I have committed to celibacy. Don't look. That is so funny. And so then sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, and James is actually the one, even though he had just come out of a time of like, he was a little bit backsliding, and then which was actually probably good at the time, because if he had been really strong in the faith, he probably wouldn't have wanted to be with me where I was at.
Yeah.
But it was watching him actually. He brought me to his other church too, the one that was really Bible based, and that really started to encourage me and teach me things. But also it was watching him, because like every morning he would just go dark for like an hour, and he would take that time every day. He'd read the scripture and pray for like 45 minutes to an hour. And I had never seen anyone do that before. I never had experienced anyone seek the Lord like that. And it was watching his seeking of the Lord that really caught my attention.
Called you up and out.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So over the course of that next year, everything started to just fall away. And was it kind of it was slow? You're saying over the year, just one thing after the other backing up. Were you canceling things, or were things just falling, or a little bit of both?
It was both. So, because I was still like, that new age stuff is not super easy to let go of. It gets very ingrained in your brain. And it was slowly that the Lord was convicting me of things. It was like, get rid of those. The Doreen Virtue angel deck, throw that out.
Yeah. Sorry, Doreen. Not sorry.
3 garbage bags of stuff. Like, it was slow. And then with the modeling thing, the funny thing is I had started turning certain things down. Okay, I felt convicted, because there's almost no way. I don't want to say there's no way, but it's almost impossible to be in the modeling industry and to be modest. Like, it's totally impossible.
Yes.
So, but the funny thing is, right at the end, I was like, okay, Lord, if you really want me to cut this off fully, like, it was this one client I had for so long, and I'm thinking, I can't do it. Like, I just was struggling so much. And they text me like that next week, and they were like, we're sorry, but we're just going to like move on to someone else. Like, I had been working with them for like a decade.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, all right, I get it. It's over. And it was a little hard. Like, it was a little hard to let go, but it felt freeing to some extent, because there's not all that pressure to be perfect all the time. Like if you cut your leg, somebody's not going to like have a conniption. That kind of pressure is like here I burned my wrist last week with my tea water. That's why I have
your poor wrist.
But if I had done that, like,
oh my gosh, it would have been a whole thing.
I would have been whipped, it would have been it. Like they don't, there's no grace. Like I said, it's very stressful.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I obviously was never in the modeling industry, but I've been in entertainment in general for a long time. And I've definitely noticed since leaving Los Angeles and getting my head out of the sand, I guess, if that's the way to put it, like, oh, there was a lot of pressure to be like perfect. And everyone around me felt that pressure as well. And leaving that has definitely been very freeing, to say the least. Like, and it's everything. It's like your nails, and like you said, your skin, and like your hair, and any wrinkles, and the way that your makeup is on, and like everything is just, yeah, it's a pressure to be perfect. And it's definitely different outside of these big coastal cities.
It is. And it weighs, especially on the girls that are younger that are in the industry, it weighs on them. And you can see it because they start making really scary decisions. And a lot of things you hear about the modeling industry are true. Like I saw girls where before Fashion Week, the only things they would consume was like Tic Tacs and champagne. That was like the diet, like Tic Tacs. And now I praise the Lord, I've never had struggled with an eating disorder. I've always just been naturally very slender. But these girls, I mean, they would just eat Tic Tacs, which is not a food. No, it's a breath mint. But they would eat that, and then there would be cocaine. Yeah. I hope this is okay to talk about.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Cocaine, Tic Tac, champagne. That was a meal, not for me. Praise the Lord, but for a lot of people.
Yeah. And it really speaks to what we were saying about the industry in general, kind of like just using you when they need you, when they want you, and spitting you out, because it's like nothing about that. And so many choices that you saw girls make, that I've seen girls make, that I've made for myself at different points in my life, are not decisions that are speaking to or reaching for like long-term goodness and health and wellness. And it's all very short-term, like use you, burn you up, kind of ruin your body, move along type of
absolutely thing. And there's a lot of abuse that goes on in the industry. There's a lot of sexual abuse. It's very real.
Do you have, okay. So I found for myself, as I've looked back at different experiences that I've had, there are things that I classified in my head as like not a big deal, or like normal even, that once I got distance, I looked back and I was like, wait a minute. That is not only not normal, that's actually super creepy and potentially even a crime, or like something that could have been very, I don't even know the word, but just like horrifying to look back on. Do you have those experiences?
When I tell you this always makes me tear up when I think about it, because, before Christ, the scripture says that we're at enmity with God, right? Before we have Christ. But even when I was at enmity with him and I was going off and doing my own thing, there were so many situations I put myself in the industry where I should have died. Not even kidding. I should have died. I should have had horrible things happen to me. And the fact that I believe this with all my heart, I guess because the Lord, he foresees everything, knew that I'd be his someday. The fact that he would protect me to some extent. Now he let me deal with a lot of consequences of my behavior, but he didn't let the enemy take my life, and that he kept me from death. That gets me every time. It's like, even before I was his, he was preserving me. But there were so many situations, like one just short example. I got out of a photo shoot at midnight in Brooklyn.
It's always fun.
I walked in 5-inch heels, skinny jeans, and a tank top in the dark in Brooklyn, got on the subway, was on a subway car with one man by myself, who, I won't get into the whole thing, but decided he didn't want to wear his pants anymore.
I was just some kind of,
and somehow made it back to Penn Station, then missed my train and had to I was in Penn Station with all the people that are there, in the early hours of the morning.
The super outstanding citizens. No offense, but
that's one of the cleaner examples of my being an idiot.
Yeah.
But that gets me every time. I think, oh my goodness, the Lord preserved me even when I was against him.
No, dude, no kidding. I have a friend out here who's from Brooklyn, and we were just talking about New York subways, and she was saying that there were multiple times where, and I mean, I don't know why she didn't, I mean, maybe because she's like yay tall, like she didn't feel comfortable enough to do anything or whatever, kind of besides the point. But she said that she has seen like sexual assaults happening on the subway where nobody does anything. It's like,
absolutely,
you were alone. So the fact that like it totally could have happened at that point is just, and he was already proving himself to not be upstanding, like is just really crazy and sad. And amazing that you were okay. Yeah, it's amazing to me, I guess, just to encapsulate that looking back and what you said about how like we get desensitized to things, because that really has been interesting for me to look back now that I'm away and go, oh, that was bad, or like that happened in front of me and I kind of wrote it off, but that was super not cool and inappropriate. If that happened to my kid, I would be really, really mad. And so praise God that he protected you. That's amazing.
That was also my last time riding the subway.
Oh, really?
I never, after that, like my career had started to take off after that. So I was making a little more money and I was like, taxis only from now on. There will be I never stepped foot in a subway again. That was the last day.
I don't blame you. Even though I mean, I don't know that I'd say conversion, but you had like this moment where you felt like God showed you a glimpse of himself and his goodness. I think I've said this like 3 times now, but it was about a year of like a journey of the stripping away, of coming to terms with what life would be looking like outside of this path that you had been walking on for over a decade. And it's so amazing. God is so good that he not only, so yes, he was stripping away, but he was also adding, not only through like your spiritual transformation, but through the gift of James. Like the fact that James came into your life, I just got chills again, came into your life, like right as God turned the ship is incredible. So how did you guys start your relationship? Like, how did that unfold? You obviously wouldn't look at him in church. I'm celibate. I can't look.
And the cool thing about how God added that in, I really, looking back on it, I think I needed spiritual leadership.
Oh my gosh, totally. As you were just,
and I needed,
go on.
I really did. I needed that. And I needed a strong, but kind male figure. I mean, my dad is an amazing dad. But I needed that on that intimate level of like, just that he has that kind of natural masculine strength about him, but he's very gentle and kind. And he really, even though he was not in the best place himself spiritually, he was starting to come out of that and like really seek the Lord. And I needed to witness that. And I needed to be under that kind of covering. I needed that leadership. And so
I think it's really like, I almost picture, not that he needed to lead you, but it's like, man, we're made for each other. Like,
oh yeah,
it's amazing how men will, not that he was stepping up for you, but I just think it was a beautiful fit. It's anyway.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's true. So we finally, I was nervous. I didn't want to turn around. And so then the next week went by. We did have an interaction out in the foyer. It was cheesy. I don't know. It was like I had on a name tag, I think. And so, somebody said, "Oh, Lee, you're going to join the small group or something." And I was like, "How did he know my name?" And James is like, "It's on your name tag."
Like, how did he know? Did he ask? You found out. They're like, it's right there.
So that was that. And then actually a mutual friend that we had just contacted me and she's like, "Listen, I know you're like coming down off a lot of trauma here, but," she's like, "there's this great guy." And she's like, just go out with him one time And then she had contacted him and she kind of described me to him. He thought that I was the one that she was talking about. I'm not sure if he was 100% sure.
Yeah.
But we went out and we went out on our first date, and I was not used to going out with men who were gentlemen. I had had a lot of experience in the last few years. Like I had boyfriends coming out of my, like I was a mess. I was a crazy mess. Like you wouldn't maybe think that now, but I had boyfriends coming out my ears.
I'll just believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when he came to pick me up, he went around to the other side of his car to open the car door for me. Oh. But I had never had anyone do that. So I thought he was going to hit the driver's side of the next car. So I like went to the other side of the next car to that passenger. She's like, where are you going? Are you coming with me? And I was like, and then I realized he was opening the door.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, oh, I could get used to that. And he's opened the door, he opened the car door for me every time we've gotten in the car since then. We'll have our 8-year wedding anniversary on the 18th of this month.
Wow.
His birthday. And he's kept doing that, but I wasn't used to that. I just wasn't used to honor.
Wow.
And I had a couple good boyfriends, but for the most part, I was really good at picking, like really good at picking a disaster. So yeah. And we had that first date in January. He proposed in May and we were married in October.
Yes. I don't feel like it takes so long when you're an adult who's been through a couple of things.
Yes.
No, like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. Like,
and he was at an age, I mean, he's older than me, but he was at an age where he was super ready. I mean, he had wanted to get married since he was like 21. He was just waiting for God to tell him, was the right person. He was 40 when we got married.
Wow. Isn't that, I just got chills again. It's incredible when someone, I don't know, that he had the patience and the clarity to wait for his wife, for who his wife was, like who God made his wife to be.
I know.
It's amazing.
Yeah, especially when you want to get married at 21. That takes a lot of patience. So.
Oh, so you guys got engaged and married over the course of that year.
Yes.
So, okay. Where did you guys live when you first got married? Because another transformation that I find fascinating about you is your homesteading transformation. And so I'm curious, like how that, like, did you guys straight up move to the little house in the mountains? Were you in an apartment? Had you ever been exposed to homesteading, like prior to your model life in the city? Like, I'm curious about all of that.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, we did live in an apartment because we were still both going into the city when we first got married. Like we weren't right near the city, but we were a little bit away from it, but we were accessible to it.
Okay.
And it was a little apartment. And again, go ahead.
Working as a stuntman back then too?
He was doing more just general acting. He had stopped doing that after a couple of years because it was too much with the industry. So then he just went to doing the stunt stuff because you can be way more removed from the industry. And he just felt convicted about how involved he was. So we were both, God was pulling both of us out of.
Yes. Sorry, I interjected there, but it's because I realized we didn't clarify to anyone that doesn't know that James has a background in the entertainment industry as well. Yeah.
That was part of what connected us too. I mean, it was the faith. It was, we come out of the same industry. We kind of know how it works.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no, he was still going in and out of the city. I was going in and out of the city. But yeah, I do have a background. So when the first house I ever lived in with my parents was this little dilapidated farmhouse my dad was a tree farmer.
Wow.
And we lived in this, the house had, no heat, no hot water. It was super rustic, like on a farm there. I remember there was cows and there was a bunch of trees and
wow.
I don't remember all the details because I was really young when we were in that one, but then I think we moved to a different one on that property. And while my dad would dig trees all day and then he'd go to law school at night.
Whoa.
And yeah, because he thought, he was like, I need more money.
Oh,
so we went
tree farming wasn't cutting it.
He's incredible. My dad's just, he's the love of my life. So So he dig trees all day, go to the law school, get up the next day, dig trees, go to law school. But I was exposed to that farmy life. And then we moved to a house in central Jersey. It was like an old farmhouse in more of a town. And we had a big woods behind our house. I was always in the woods. I was always in the river. I was always building tree forts. So I was a woodsy girl. And my dad would take me back there, teach me how to forage and all that kind of stuff. He would help me build, he would help me build stuff out of grapevines. So like I have that, my dad's really big on nature and we'd go on a camping trip every year together. So I have that background in loving all of those things. But of course, the industry in the city kind of like sweeps you away from it. So we got married, and then the Lord did the thing again where he forced us into where he wanted us. So we were living in this apartment. We thought this is where we were going to be. And James owned a rental property. And the guy that was living in the rental property we owned didn't pay his rent, destroyed the rental property. So we didn't have the money to pay our rent. So the Lord was he was forcing us out of where we thought we were supposed to be. This was the whole thing. And I can look back on it now. So we had to move into that rental property to fix it so we could sell it, right? So we moved there. That was a disaster. And then we had just been married too. And that was trial by fire. So
welcome to marriage.
So we moved into there, we fixed that up. And while we were trying to sell that, we had to move into my parents' basement. Like it was this whole, but that moved us out here west because my parents had moved a little farther west towards the mountains.
Okay.
So it was like this little, he was swooping us because James was always like, I'm never going to move that far west. And the Lord was like, oh, but you
really? Here we go.
So
like God forcing you into something. I've experienced that, as you know, in the last year. I wasn't going to let go of certain things. And he was like, yes, you are. There you go.
James always jokes now. He's like, I can never say that I'm not going to do something because every time I say it.
Never say never. Exactly. It's whatever God has for us. Okay. So
it's so true. It's so true. So we were living in their basement while we were selling that house.
Wow.
And then we were kind of just looking, we wanted to keep the cost really low. I didn't know what we wanted, but we basically put this 20-minute radius around my parents' house in the little search app and with this low budget. And we were kind of, because we had been stripped of everything. We were stripped of, my career and the thing with the rental property, we were just stripped down to so little. So it was just a really humbling experience. And basically every house we saw was either half burned down or it was just crazy. So we walked into the little house on the mountain and it had its quirks, but we were like, okay, it's intact. It's got a little wood burning stove. This is cool. It's in the trees. It's got a lake, and it just all worked out. And so we ended up here at this house. This was a couple years after we got married, and we've been here 6 years. And it took me a year or two into living here to be I'm going to start digging into the homesteading stuff again.
Wow. Okay. So when you were there, you're just living, hanging out. And then you're like, wait a minute, I'm in the woods. I think I want to start doing this again.
Yeah. I just didn't think it's a small property and it's up on a mountain. And I guess in my head, I didn't think that I could do much with the property. And I remember the Holy Spirit spoke to me one day in my heart and was just why not? Just because it's not ideal. And I think that's a really good lesson. Just because your space or your situation isn't the ideal of what you'd think in your head would be appropriate for you wanting to accomplish your goals. Yeah. It was work with what you've been given and make the most of it. And then maybe someday the Lord will give you more. But it was just this really good lesson for me of just work with bloom where you're planted, work with what you have. Try to be content and use what you've been given, and we've been given so much. So that was a really, really good lesson for me, and I've learned a lot.
And you've conveyed that message to lots of people, because that is something I want to circle back to this, and I don't want to go too far off now because I want to ask you about how YouTube started, but in the spirit of replying to that, kind of jumping ahead, your content, God really used your content and what you put out to speak to me about those very things, about having contentment, not only in like simplicity, like the simple things in life, but also in what you've been given, because we have been given so much. And I mean, part of it also here in the States, I think we're used to like a different level of luxury, I don't know, and realizing like, wow, this really, like, I really have a lot. And you really have conveyed that through your videos. And it's been beautiful to see like, okay, if God's impacted me through you doing that, through you sharing your heart and what he's worked on through you, it's incredible to think like, okay, well, there's other eyeballs on your channel than just me. So he's probably used your work, your guys' work, to impact lots of other people's hearts and minds. So on that note, 6 years in the little house, I'm trying to think what that means in regards to your YouTube channel, because you guys have been on here for a minute.
Like around a little over 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so you were in your house for about a year before you started. So what were you guys there?
It's interesting. Even when we were at my parents' house, I was talking about it a little bit, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to figure out how to share what my testimony, like I wanted to figure out how to share some of the things God had done with me. That was kind of like the initial impetus for it. Was I want to show people what's possible, when God comes in your life. And on that other note of like, we living in this society where we have so much, I think it was because he had done such a work already, and he had brought me to such a place of humility in terms of, I had been living in this world where people had so much money. I mean, between the new age clients, it was a very wealthy community that I was kind of tapped into.
Yeah.
And the modeling industry, dating an NBA player, like it's a very gluttonous world.
Yeah.
And when you go from being used to penthouse parties and all this nonsense that, that a lot of people think, okay, this is the goal, right?
Yeah.
And God strips all of that away. And I started, you start reading the Bible and you see, Paul in 2 Corinthians talking about a life of simplicity and godliness. And you see this thing about living a quiet life and working with your own hands. And you realize, oh my goodness, the message of the word is completely opposite the message of the world.
Yeah.
And it's so non-materialistic. And so that was just like a huge transformation for me mentally.
Do you feel like, sorry,
No, go ahead.
I don't know when to, I was literally thinking about this yesterday, because I was exposed to a lot of that as well, and experienced a lot of things that it was like, whoa, like I didn't think I could get checks that big at different points. I didn't think that I would fly on certain planes. Like it's, just all these things that it's like, wow, that's so amazing. But something about experiencing that, it's almost like I had to, because I think I would have wondered or been climbing for it or reaching for it. But it's like the experiences that I got seeing all of that almost made me realize that like, oh yeah, this is like not a big deal and it doesn't matter, and money comes and money goes, and like it's not this thing worth clawing for. And it's not, the word isn't not that impressive isn't the right word, but it's like meh, like just not. And I think part of that was being up close with some of it and seeing like how empty it really is, and how you really do, like you always hear celebrities say this, right? That they'll like have everything and then they'll still have moments of like despair, like they're not happy. But when you experience it up close, like, oh yeah, those feelings, that emptiness is like, it's not filled by those things. And I'm kind of grateful in that sense that I got to experience that, because now I know it. I'm not just like telling myself that. It's like, oh, I experienced it. I know that that's not worth it and it's not satisfying. Do you feel similarly that like experiencing it up close gave you a really visceral feeling of like, not worth it? Not even.
Because also I saw so many unhappy people.
Yes. Yes.
They had so much beyond every material thing you could ever ask for.
Yeah.
And there was broken relationships everywhere. Everybody was on, and I'm not trying to say anything about people who are on medicines for depressions or stuff, but everybody was on those.
Yeah.
And my point is, like, everybody was anxious, everybody was depressed,
Yes.
everybody had relational problems.
Yes.
And I think about like one of my like one moment that somebody might think is like a pinnacle moment in the
Mm,
industry, and I'm standing in a window in a high-end hotel in Paris with
mm,
this, $20,000 gown on. Someone else is paying the tab. I'm standing there, they're taking the picture. You're standing there with the glasses, whatever in your hand. And that moment where probably so many young girls today would be like, if I could just, it's like
yeah.
from The Devil Wears Prada, where she's like, a million girls would want this job. And she's like, well, I'm not
Totally.
one of them.
Yeah.
Right. And and that moment in time, like I think about the moments now, sitting with, I got chicken hay on the ground, I got this and that and whatever. Um, and I think about the moments now where I'm just sitting outside on my patio, and I'll all of a sudden feel like the Holy Spirit, like I'll feel that comfort, and
Yeah.
I'll feel the presence of the Lord, and it'll be like that little moment in time, and like nothing I have ever experienced on the planet comes close to knowing the love of God. Like
Yes.
absolutely 1000% nothing.
Yes.
And so I have materially, I have so much less than I had then, but I actually have peace. I actually have joy.
Was just gonna say it. You feel richer, even though richer
Yeah.
is the wrong word because it's I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hijack.
No. It's just,
It
it's
works
so,
so much.
God is so faithful, like so beyond good. And his riches, like the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus, are just beyond anything
Mm,
that I have ever touched or experienced
mm,
in this world. But on that note, so with YouTube, I wanted people to see what was possible,
mm.
and then kind of share my testimony. And so we started the ministry. And honestly, like looking back, I really honestly feel like now in hindsight, I did feel like the Lord was leading me to share my testimony and to
Mm,
talk of him. But
mm.
in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have, in hindsight, we probably wouldn't have, I don't know. It's one of those, it's so hard. Do you ever have those things where you look in hindsight and part of you feels like you wouldn't do something again, but then you're like, but then some good came out of it, so like you would
Yes.
do it again? Have you ever had that trippy?
Oh, even just the experience we talked about last year.
Oh, yes.
Like with sharing it with everyone. It's like
Yes,
part of me is like, oh man, I wish I could take that back. And part of me is like, look at what God's done through that.
I know.
And then the
So,
list probably goes on and on. Yes, I've had those
so I'm
experiences.
having a hard time verbalizing my thoughts on starting the ministry, because part of me feels like,
Yeah.
well, I definitely wasn't qualified. I know that now.
Mm,
But I was qualified to share my testimony. Everybody's qualified to share their testimony. So looking back, I guess I would have done it different. I would have still done it, but I would have done it different, if that
yeah,
makes any sense.
totally. Because
Um,
I've seen you kind of make big adjustments as your ministry is unfolding.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And then a couple years after that, I started Little House on the Mountain, because I more wanted to show more what the life that God led me into looks like more on a daily basis, and not just videos talking about topics, but more just here's here's the peace that God can bring.
Yeah.
Here's the contentment that God can bring. And I wanted, and I also, as the world got more chaotic, I wanted to give people like this little piece of something they could go to, they could take a deep breath, get a cup of tea, and just be like, let's just watch a Little House on the Mountain video and just calm down. And I wanted people to have that. I wanted, there's a lot of beautiful channels out there, but I wanted to give people that little glimpse of peace in the middle of their day and kind of show them what's possible with God.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've always had this struggle online between like talking versus just like share, like kind of like I think what you're saying, like sharing day-to-day life. And in the beginning, I know how do I even word this? You're saying that you were a lot more outspoken in the beginning about certain topics, kind of like cultural commentary, but from a Christian perspective. And I feel the same way about that, like watching your transformation through that season, as I feel like almost God stripped things away from you even more during that
Absolutely.
time. And then stepping into the Little House on the Mountain channel and just seeing all of that unfold was also really beautiful to see, like, okay, yeah, we can make changes online. We can follow God's lead. And she's doing it confidently and she's going where God's leading her. So there's that. But also, yeah, Little House on the Mountain, that channel, I'm like trying to put myself back into when I first started watching your videos. And I remember you guys did a great job of conveying exactly what you're saying you were trying to convey, because I was very impacted. Like, wow, I want to lead a slower life, which by that point I was in Nashville. And that's a big reason. It's so funny in retrospect, but that's a big reason we went to Nashville, was to lead a slower life, which
Yeah.
I always tell everyone, I'm like, if that doesn't tell you I'm a native Angelino, I don't know what, because once I got there, I'm like, oh, Nashville's a major city, like, duh. But it actually was a slower life for us because LA was like 10 times the size of Nashville. So I would sit in traffic for hours. There was so much more just pulling at me and happening. And so my life did slow down dramatically in Nashville. And I had never gardened I'd never had a house plant before I got to Nashville. So all of that was totally new to me. And watching your channel and seeing, like, just like what you worded, what life could be like, how I could shape my home, the things that I could do with my hands, the things I could try to make, was very inspiring to me. And you know that I told you that over the years, like, wow, you really inspired me in this way and that way. And I appreciate that you followed God's calling on your heart to share those things, because we all know that right now there's a big kickback to this whole idea of like feminism and what that is. But it's not just the idea of feminism, obviously, it's like how it's infiltrated everything, including the home. And so you leading by example and sharing what it looks like to have a place of rest and walk out your God-given femininity, is really inspiring. And the biggest thing too is it's Little House on the Mountain, like watching you build it up and build your garden and get your chickens, and like that's so encouraging, because so many people don't have farmland, they don't have the space to be doing things. And seeing how you have been a good steward of what God has given you has really inspired me. So that's kind of a side note, but not a side note. So you started the channel, there's that. I just had to say all of that to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so you've been doing Little House now for like 4 years?
No, it's 4.5-ish. I mean, it kind of started like I was doing kind of day in the life stuff. And I don't know, it was, how stuff just transforms over time, where God shows you, like, he just keeps showing you, he grows you and teaches you how to have certain, use the equipment and do the things. But yeah, it was really about getting women's hearts focused back on simplicity, godliness, homemaking, like all the things that I was not doing in my previous life. Homemaking, creating, like you said, a space of rest for your family. And it's not about perfection. I've had some people comment, like, oh, you're just trying to show this perfect. My life is far from perfect.
I'll just say I've never gotten that vibe from you. I've gotten the opposite, that you're very open and vulnerable in the sense of like, I'm learning and I'm sharing. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you. But there is an aspect to it of art for me. It is an art form for me. And so those artistic touches, my mom's an artist. She's very aesthetic in the way she sees things. And so I probably picked up on some of that, but I like to walk into an environment and feel like it's poetic. That's just how I find creation poetic. I want the environment to be poetic and aesthetic. And that to me is different than perfection.
Totally.
It's creating like a warmth, and like my favorite word in the whole world is cozy. That's my favorite word.
Oh, yes.
It's my favorite word. So I want to, it's almost like you want to walk into a space and feel an emotion.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And then I also wanted to share some of my writings. I've been a writer since I was young, and I wanted to put down some of that poetry, the way that creation inspired that poetry in my heart. I wanted to put it down in writing and then share it in the voiceovers
Yes.
with the video. So yes, it's a piece of art for me. It's an artistic expression, but it also has that heart of really wanting to inspire people to come back to the old ways, the simpler things, to again do the opposite of what the world is trying to train you to do, and go back to a more simplistic way of life. And it's possible. It's possible. You can get out of those things. It might be like hard. There are different challenges for different people to cultivate that, a more slow life. And it might take some time, it might be some time of rearranging some things in life, but with God, it's fully and wholly possible. And I do think he desires that.
Yeah. Well, I think the artistic presentation of your videos is part of what God uses to like capture hearts. It allows your imagination to really like, I don't know, you want to see the beauty, you want to get into it. And so I appreciate the artistic element, and I'm the same way. I like making the art of it. And honestly, it's like in so many ways, and we'll see what happens over the next few years. I mean, everything with like the technocracy has really been fascinating to watch unfold. But I have felt like YouTube has been such a gift in the sense that like, even when I was living in LA doing YouTube, I still felt this to a degree, because prior to YouTube, I was doing like acting, more traditional entertainment industry type stuff, dancing and singing, and just more traditional entertainment. Yeah. And YouTube felt like a godsend. Like, wait, I can just make my own things. Like, I don't have to try to get cast or go here and go there. And like, it got turned up as traditional entertainment kind of got their claws into everything. And then things changed as years moved forward, but still I'm here. It'll be 11 years in December on YouTube.
And your videos have transformed a lot.
A lot.
I went back and I looked through the whole like scope. I like seeing people's transformation.
Totally. Yeah.
I was like, your videos have transformed a lot.
A lot. And I've never taken any of them down really. I mean, I've put up thousands of videos between multiple channels, and I've privated maybe 2 or 3 for like reasons of like that information wasn't correct. I'm privating it and I knew it was off, but I never take any of it down because I want people to see the transformation. I'm like, it's fine. Like it's there, it's out there, whatever. But yeah, I'm so grateful for the gift of YouTube, of being able to create what I want to create and share it with people. And I'm grateful that people like you are able to do the same, because even though we've never met, it's like, I don't know, your heart has touched mine, and like my heart has touched your, and like we've been able to touch from across the country via our art. And it's such a gift. And it's such a gift to not only just create art, but to get to, like you said, walk out the art in a way that feels like you can hopefully encourage women to have the confidence to reach for a more simple, slower life.
Something different than what they've been told their whole life they are supposed to do.
Yes. And so much of the art that's glorifying, it's glorifying the world. So it's, go on.
And, it's interesting. I have found over the years that I've gotten a lot of pushback and hateful things over transforming and transitioning what I'm doing online. Because people will come up with all kinds of terrible, like they put motives on you.
100%.
They'll put a motive on you. Like I've seen things like, oh, she's doing it because of this reason. I'm like, I'm sorry, do you live in my house?
That's crazy.
And they will apply a motive.
I know.
And it's like, especially if you call yourself a Christian, I've seen Christians do this, say these things about me. And I'm thinking, aren't we supposed to want each other to grow in the Lord?
Yes.
Isn't that like part of the entire point, is for us to have an ongoing testimony? So if you see me continuing to change and transform, instead of applying some evil motive you've concocted in your brain, how about just thinking maybe the Lord's working on her? That's great. And I hope the Lord I want to see other people grow and women grow and transform and become the best version of themselves and find their purpose and live in their purpose and grow in their purpose. Why are you applying evil motives to people that you don't know? You think you know them because they're on the internet.
Yes.
And that's part of the problem. People think they know me or all the motives of my heart. And I know what's happened to you because they see your face on the internet.
Yeah.
That is a very dangerous, because that gets into bearing false witness and slandering. And if you're a believer, that is a major no-no. So I have to say, like, because even now, like I shared with you before, I actually haven't announced this, so this will be the first time, but I'm working on a podcast.
Oh yes,
I'm working on a video podcast, audio and video. And it's interesting because I had gotten away from talking about topics like I had shared. I went into just doing the little house. And part of that was because there was so much nasty things that were being said that I needed to I still wanted to continue to put out videos, but I needed to do things that were that felt a little less personal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I needed that buffer zone. Because people were being just really inappropriate. Yeah. And I needed that buffer zone. But now that I feel like, again, I've grown a little bit in that time with the Lord, and I have more wisdom about how to say things. And He's shown me things in myself that I needed to change. And so now I feel like I can speak about things, and I'm in a much more wise, capable place than I was a few years ago, because there are things that I regret, but it's all part of the transformational journey. And I hope when people look back at where I was and where I am now, that's what they see. They see God working, as opposed to applying some motive that is completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do whatever He wants me to do. And that's going to look different from year to year.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I know you know that because I've seen you go through the same thing.
Yes, I don't think this is true of everyone, but I think it's true for some people that if they've never had tons of opinions being thrown at them, they just don't even realize, I don't even know that they're applying false motive. They're just like, obviously, like, this seems to be what's happening. Right. But there's something about having lots of opinions thrown at you that makes that honestly, it's sanctified me in the way that I even look at other people, because I've experienced so much like you said, not appropriate motives being attached to me, misinterpretations of the things that I've done, that it also has made me be like, when am I doing that to other people? Like, maybe I'm more low key than the person to the left of me, and I'm not going to write a comment or talk about them, but I'm thinking, and it's like, when have I done that? Maybe I'm so confident that I'm right, but I'm not. So it
makes you more aware of the gossip in your own heart.
Yeah.
The slander in your own heart, the misjudging in your own heart.
Yeah.
Or not giving enough grace to people.
Yeah.
And it makes you more aware of that. It's made me more aware of it.
Yeah.
Because it really is the internet, this can be used for so much good.
Right.
And it can be used for just such depths of evil. And I have seen that, yes, worldly people, but quite frankly, I have seen such depths of evil come from people who profess to be Christians. And I just imagine that breaks the Lord's heart.
Yeah.
So much.
It's wild. My brain's wandering 42 different directions. Okay. I'm just totally, man. Yeah. But I'm excited for you to do your podcast. I had mentioned to you in my message that I was like, I know this sounds weird, but you actually, in some ways, have inspired me to speak out more, even though in recent years you've kind of stepped back a little bit from that. And I almost can't quite, it's weird. I keep thinking about that. Why is it Lee that pops in my head? Because I almost can't quite put my finger on it. I don't know if I don't even really know what it is. I don't know if it's just confidently following God's call in your life. And it's this is what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing right now, and I'm just going to follow. I really don't know. So maybe it's pointless for me to chime in, but you are part of what comes to my mind when I've addressed things like more cultural topics online, and I've spoken about things. So I'm excited that you're going to be doing that, because I want to hear your takes on things. And even though I know that you said that you're a little bit, you regret certain things, I've taken a lot from what you've said online over the years, and I've appreciated you and your voice. And yeah,
You are a brave girl. You are you are a brave girl. You there's like almost nothing that you won't just
it's
touch.
not fully true, and that's what scares me a little bit. There's so much more that
I'm like, wow, Nikki is brave.
Thanks.
I think it's good though. I think courage is needed right now. Courage is needed.
And that's the feeling. It's like, I don't want to overstep. I don't want to say something that obviously that God doesn't want me to say. Like, I don't know how else to word that.
Yeah.
But also, the cancellation really brought me to this place of like, I can't be bullied into silence. Like this, if I leave right now, if I just shut up, if I stop, it's solely because people are bullying me. And
that's what the enemy wants. That's what he wants.
Yes.
He will use people as a mouthpiece.
Yes.
To get you to stop doing what your purpose is. When they put those hateful things on and they say terrible things and they apply motives to you, this is what I've realized in my own life. It's because they are being used as a mouthpiece by the enemy to try to get you to shut up.
Yes.
Because if God is using you to touch the lives of other women so that they can live their full purpose and be everything that he created them to be, who wants you to be quiet?
Yes.
It's the enemy. And
yeah.
so
And I struggled with that a lot after everything. And we had pastoral counseling, and it was like, am I supposed to just stop everything? Like, maybe that's what this is. And it was amazing working with a pastor who was basically like, I don't think that's the situation. Like, if your husband is behind you and he's saying you're good and you guys are on the same page, like, I think it's probably the opposite. And I was like, oh, all right. So it's been a while, but being drugged through the coals like that, I don't know. I don't want to say like, what else are you going to do? But there was part of me that was like, I never saw that coming. And so I just got to follow his lead and see what happens. I'm really glad that you're coming back with the podcast, and I'm really excited to hear that. So that's what's next. That was what was on my kind of near the end of my list. Now I have one more question. If you, once again, like everything, if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. But you've mentioned before just walking out this chapter, and I think you know where I'm going, of not, and I never like the word infertility, like not getting pregnant yet. And I know that's something you've desired. Are you willing to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So what has that journey been like? Where are you at right now? Yeah. Where's your mind at?
And so when I got my first cycle, when I was, after I turned 12, and I remember it just, the way that my friends were acting about their cycles, like I knew something wasn't right, because like I was out for the count when it would happen to me, and they weren't. And I remember like they would complain about bloating but it was just, I'm like, I'll take bloating. Like mine was just, yeah, mine was bad. And I started getting all kinds of other symptoms with it. A lot of digestive issues, headaches. Like it was like a full body experience where I'd get like achy in my whole body. Anyway, I'm just sharing that to say that I got finally diagnosed when I had the lung collapse with endometriosis. It took that long, between 12 and like 18, 19. And the reason I got diagnosed with that is because it was a catamenial pneumothorax, which is endometrial blisters on it. I've had it in a lot. It had spread out of my uterus. So
it was in your lungs as well?
I had these blisters on my lung that burst, and that's what caused the pneumothorax. Yeah. So that's when I finally got the diagnosis, even though I probably should have gotten it a lot sooner than that. But you know how
yeah.
Let me just say, I am thankful for the medical industry for emergencies.
Totally.
And for diagnostics.
Yeah.
But in terms of like preventative medicine, in terms of them specializing in things, and it just, there's some lacking things there.
I've had antibiotics before when I felt like it really saved me. I will throw that out there too. And I'm not like an antibiotic taker,
emergencies, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, but they throw you on birth control. And of course, I became a vegetarian, which actually, not to upset anyone I was a vegetarian for 18 years. So not to upset anyone, because I totally get it.
18 years.
18 years I was one. Yeah.
Whoa.
And until the Lord showed me that I was a mess.
Wow.
So I get it. I get the vegetarian thing, but it screwed me up.
Yeah.
Totally screwed me up, on top of the birth control. So on top of having endometriosis, which was probably stage 4 by the time, which is the worst you can have by the time I was 20.
Wow.
I was on birth control. I was eating the wrong diet. And when you're a vegetarian, a lot of times you eat a lot of soy, which is like literally the worst thing I could have been eating for endometriosis, because I had elevated estrogen and low progesterone and a big pile of mess. And so by the time I cried out to the Lord, this is after I was born again, and migraines and couldn't move on my period and just really bad symptoms, I did a fast to like pray about my health. And during that fast, he told me to fast in my spirit. I didn't hear him in my ear, but in my spirit, I felt like he told me to fast from gluten. That was just during that period of time. I think he was just showing me some things. He was showing me there's some changes needed to happen. And that's when he told me to start in my spirit. And this is how I know it wasn't me, because I was a vegetarian 18 years. And I felt like he was telling me to drink bone broth. And I was like, and I would literally remember the reaction. It was during a fast. And I felt this thing in my spirit, like, drink some bone broth, the most randomness. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
Oh,
I did. Obviously now I make it all the time, but I was like, I'm not doing that. So I knew it wasn't me. I knew it was him. But all that to be said, this has been like a huge journey. I've completely changed so many things. He's given me so much wisdom. He's so faithful.
Wow.
And I'm like so much healthier than I was then.
It's amazing.
But the endometriosis was at stage 4 at that point. I'll be 37 this month.
Well, happy early birthday.
What?
I said happy early birthday.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll be 37. And I just, obviously, every month if you're not trying to stop it and you're not getting pregnant, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And, and then you hit 35 and they try to start telling you you're like geriatric.
Yeah.
But then I had never had a surgery for it. This past December, I felt like the Lord was like, just go in and get stuff cleaned out from your old life. That's what it felt like. Because I never was going to get surgery, but it just felt like, and I haven't actually, I'd never talked about it publicly. I didn't talk about it when I went in for the surgery. I'm just a private person. That way I'm sharing it here now to give context, but I'm not one of those people that goes on Facebook like, I have a tummy ache. I ate a blueberry today. Like, that's not my thing.
I'm that person 50% of the time. I'm really inconsistent. Sometimes I'm like sharing it all, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know you anything.
I'm just not. I wasn't like after the surgery, like, oh, I'm sweating profusely today. Like, I'm not, that's not my thing. So I felt like he was just saying, get the past cleaned out. It was like symbolic of like, get the stuff from your old life cleaned out. It's almost like the analogy of it's easier to keep a room clean when there's not clutter.
Totally.
So like all that endometrial tissue just from my past just needed to be cleaned out. So I did have that. But the surgeon said to me right to my face, you cannot get pregnant without IVF. That's what he said right to my face. Now,
wow.
I don't know what everybody's theology is, but for me, I consider that what's called an evil report. That's like a word curse.
Report is an evil report. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a word curse. It's an evil report. Now, he doesn't know that. He's a nice guy. He's not trying to,
he's telling you what he thinks are facts.
He's saying you need to be on this heavy duty medication for 6 months, and then you have to do IVF. That's it. I turned down the heavy duty medication because all the Lord instructed me to do was get the old stuff cleaned out. None of this other, none of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And I've always felt convicted. This is not to down anyone who's used interventions. I have always felt convicted not to.
Yeah.
always. No IUI, no IVF, no nothing. The only interventions are me living a healthy life, doing the things I feel like the Lord's telling me to do.
Yeah.
But I've always felt convicted about that. And so immediately I just said, I break every word curse that he just spoke over my body. And I spoke the scripture. He said, about the will of God. I spoke scriptures about the will of God over my life. I spoke scriptures about how God is a God of restoration. And he's the God who forgives iniquity, heals diseases, redeems from destruction, crowns with loving kindness and tender mercies. And so I spoke all those things over myself. But where I'm at with it now is, and it took some years, like it was an up and down journey with quote barrenness, right? Whatever word you want to use. I don't, like, when I talk about it, I don't say to people, I'm barren. I don't say to people, I'm infertile. I don't talk like that.
That's why I never know what word to use, because I totally understand why. I'm like, that's not, it's like speaking like that is what it is, and I don't like it.
Dealing with infertility or dealing with barrenness is different than saying I am.
Oh, that
barren.
makes sense. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes
it's
sense.
Like if you're struggling with a sin, it's like I'm like
that totally makes sense.
Yeah, like I would always say, like, when people in the context of, like, my brother was struggling with addiction, right? And I would be like, he's struggling with addiction. I always said to him, don't go around saying I am an addict.
Yeah.
Because God can deliver you from absolutely anything. And God says you're my brother was saved, praise God, before he passed away. Yes. So God says you're a son. He says you're redeemed and you're all these things. You're struggling with addiction. So I can have this struggle in my life of barrenness, but I'm not barren. I'm fruitful. Yeah. Because I'm God's daughter. So where I've gotten to is, like, I think the most important thing with this struggling with barrenness or infertility is the ability to be happy for other women.
Yeah.
So that's been, like, the biggest element of it for me that I've found to be the most important, excuse me, is being able to rejoice with other people. Yeah. Because I became a doula, a birth doula I want to say like 2008.
Wow.
Sorry. I'm not used to talking to other people this much.
I do feel a little bad. I'm like, oh, dang, I've had her on here for like 2 hours.
No, not at all. I talk to my dogs and my chickens during the day, but not usually this much to other people.
Yes. So go on. So being happy for other women. Oh, and doula in 2008.
Wow. I became a doula. I just, pregnancy and birth is hands down one of the most greatest tangible manifestations of God's glory and miracle.
Yes.
And I just wanted to be a part of it. Oh my gosh. We're falling apart.
I've kept you for 2 hours. You can make it to the finish line.
So yeah, I just wanted to be a part of it. It's like, it's crazy. Like, just the fact that those few cells, forget about the whole baby, like, can even just create a kidney that functions the way it's supposed to. Yeah, it's mind blowing. So I wanted to be a part of that, and I think it's been really helpful in me being a part of other women's journey has been really helpful in being able to be joyful for other people, because it's forced me to, because I'm in that situation. Yeah. And the Lord's, I'm so sorry.
No, and if you're like, yo, I gotta go
now. No, I have like this tickle in my throat. Is it rude if I use a cough drop?
No, use a cough drop. Do it. Hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, so it's forced me, because the Lord would put me in situations where I had to see things and be really in those moments with women, and be in their happiness and really genuinely feel it with them. And I think that it was a sanctifying thing.
I can only imagine.
But that's where I'm at. I'm able to be happy for other people. I have my moments of sadness where I will, when I'm turning 37.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of in that weird in between place between I'm not young and I don't have a ton of time, but I'm not like past my childbearing years. So it's that weird in
Like
between
it's still
time where,
totally possible.
yeah, where you're really surrendering it.
Yeah.
And I know that if it's not the Lord's will, it's because he has something else he needs me to do.
Yes.
And I'm okay with that. Would I love to have a child? Yes.
Yeah.
But if it's genuinely not his will, he knows why.
Yes, exactly.
I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it is his will, I don't care what a surgeon says. I don't care what, because I've had other people tell me you have like a 0.1% chance, you know, but it doesn't matter what anyone says about you or whatever statistics they have. If something is God's will, there is nothing on heaven or in hell or on earth that can stop. So
totally. And no offense to doctors, but they're like professional at stating things over you. And then it like not panning out that way. You're like, why? Why did you state that so boldly when that wasn't even
yeah.
the case? So it's
my message is don't own that.
Yes.
Don't own evil reports.
Yes. I like that. Well, I don't like that, but evil reports. That's good. That's good.
So don't, like, if somebody says anything to you, even if it's a parent or a spouse or a doctor, somebody saying something to you that is opposite to what the word of God says, even if they have good intentions, it's an evil report.
Yeah, that's a good phrase.
And so you have to just say, like, you don't have to say it right to their face, but just,
I rebuke your evil report.
Yes. No, you just go to Lord and you say, okay, Lord, this is what was spoken over me. I reject that because I don't see that in your word. Yeah. This is what I see in your word.
Yes.
I see that your word says you form my inward parts. You know, I see that your word says that you count the hairs on my head. Yes. So anything anyone says over you that's contrary to what the word of God says, you have to, this is just my opinion, out loud, say what the truth is. So the whole spirit realm knows where you stand on it. That's my opinion. I
love that. And I am so glad to hear that that's where your head is at right now. And I am right there with you. It is amazing. God does something amazing through not forcing you, but putting you in the position to have to like genuinely celebrate with other people who are where you want to be. It really transforms your heart and your mind. So that's really amazing that you've accepted that and that he's done that and that that's where you're at.
And I think that's where a lot of, when I see other women who are feeling bitter, they're in like a season of bitterness about it when it comes to struggling with infertility. A lot of it is that they're having a hard time being joyful for other people, and they'll see things and it'll just, but that is coming from, and I've been in those seasons, thankfully, briefly.
Yeah.
But it comes from a place of not being content with where God has you. And that's hard to admit.
Yeah.
But that's just one of those things you have to go before the creator of the heavens and the earth, who nothing is too hard for, and just say, I'm angry. Yeah. I think people have this thing where they feel like they can only come to God when they're in a certain place. And like it's almost like you're not allowed to tell him you're angry. But
it's so weird. It's like he knows.
Yeah, he already knows. And I think he's almost waiting for you to just be the one to come and say, hey, Father, Dad, I'm angry. I feel bitter. And I know that you can deliver this out of my heart. Or if there's a spirit I'm struggling with that's oppressing me in this area, you have the power to deliver. We don't have to just accept these things. Oh, that's just how it is. I'm just bitter. I'm just this, I'm just that. I'm just angry. Yeah. The Lord wants to deliver. That's who he is. He's a deliverer. And so I've had those moments where I've come to him and said, this is what I'm feeling. This is the honest emotion, but I don't want to live in it. I am not living in this space. And I know you are a deliverer.
Yes.
So deliver me, Father. And he always has, like, he's faithful in that.
Yeah. It's amazing what your prayer life and your relationship with the Lord, what happens with it when you're not avoiding the obvious. You just tell him how you're feeling and you just say it. It really does something the feeling of intimacy that you have.
It's authentic.
Yes. Yes.
And he knows.
Yeah. And you're right. Like it can be hard to go through it. You know, after I miscarried, I was surprised a couple of times with the way it would just like bubble up. You know, like I joined a mom's group at our church shortly after, and it, you know, maybe it was too soon, but maybe it wasn't. And that was exactly what I needed. And I went to the group and I was just surprised to feel like, because there were a lot of pregnant women around me and a lot of like women with newborns. And all of a sudden it was just like, and I like had to leave the room and I'm like crying in the bathroom. But it is really amazing because one of those moms sensed that. And she left and she like met me when I came outside of the bathroom and she was like, I'm sorry. Can I hug you? And I was like, okay. And it was really beautiful to see a sister in Christ step out and know that I was hurting and not just like, oh, just let me be by myself.
She had that awareness. She had that awareness, which is so nice. I do appreciate when people have somewhat awareness, you know, of, okay, this person struggles with infertility. So I'm just going to be aware of that.
Yes.
And not just say anything that comes to my head first, you know,
say anything.
It's like when people say that, like, I do have to say, if you know someone's struggling with infertility, just, you know, because I've had people say stuff to me like, oh, if you just gained 15 pounds, and they don't know, like, my whole life, I mean, every woman in my family is slender, every single one of them. My whole life, I've been this, you know, skinny, lanky, but my whole life I've had trouble gaining weight, no matter what. And I eat a super clean diet, but that's always, so like for you to be like, oh, if you just, she goes, oh, just go to your doctor and get a pill that'll make you gain 15 pounds and then you'll get pregnant. It's like,
yeah, no, that's good advice in general for like any topic someone's maybe just don't blurt out your simplistic, you know, prescription. I used to feel that way when I had severe cystic acne. I'm like, if I have one more person tell me that I need to try Proactiv, I'm going to explode. Like, thanks. I tried it 3 times. It was pretty horrifying.
So just for the record, I'm doing everything a person can do on a natural level.
Yes, I totally believe that, knowing you.
Everything a person can do spiritually, physically. So at this point, it is fully up to the creator.
Yes. And healing.
And you'll be one of the, I'll message you. You'll be one of the first people to know if it happens.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's healing. Healing can take time too. So that's the other thing is it's like, you don't even know what's going on in your body and what's, I mean, I always think about that with like gardens, right? Like time is that irreplaceable element. Like no matter how much you want to wish it away, it's like, even if you're doing everything right, it's like, maybe you are doing everything right, but still the time has to pass. Like you can't get rid of it. So man, yeah, I appreciate all of that. And it's really interesting because prior to having Logan, and I've talked about this on my channel a little bit, that like having Logan made me really realize why Satan doesn't want women to have children, like up close and personal, and seeing like you worded it exactly right. It's like the closest physical experience I've ever had to God, in the sense of like all of a sudden, boom, new soul. Like what? A new soul? It's the craziest.
And every part of his body came together perfectly so that every single part of his body could function exactly as it was. It's
unreal. And it was so crystal clear instantly, like, this is why Satan doesn't want women to have children. This is why this whole narrative in our culture.
And I never wanted them, by the way. I didn't want children.
Any children.
I did not.
Oh, wow.
So that's part of my journey. And that's part of what I've had to repent before the Lord for, because I know spiritually that was part of the whole thing. And because the world,
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Tells you. And to be honest, most of the friends I had in the world with kids, they were not happy with it. They were not happy having kids. Like they'd be like, oh, I love my kids. But then like everything they'd say about it was just, it was so scary to me. I'm like, you are miserable.
That's exactly, yes.
And so it was not like this great billboard So
Yeah.
I always thought I'd adopt like an older child. I always just thought like I'll adopt like maybe a 10-year-old someday. It's not that I never wanted to be a mom, it's that the way that people made pregnancy, birth,
Yes.
newborns,
Yes.
toddlers, kids, teenagers, the way they made it all sound was like it was like horrendous.
Yes.
But now being in a different kind of group of people, like women that are just really devoted believers and they have like 6 7 8 kids, and just watching that they can have joy.
Yes.
And it's been a whole different experience, like Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone, like
I know.
she's rocking it out, right? Or Janelle from Parsnips and Parsimony, or just even women in my life, like
Yes.
this lady Rebecca. She's just, I watch her and I'm like, okay, she has like a million kids, and she's healthy and happy and joyful and has a good marriage. But everything I saw in the world was like, they had the kids and then like the marriage fell apart and the body fell
Totally.
apart and the brain
Yes.
fell apart and like everything, and that's just being super real. So I just always thought, I'm good. I don't need that. But then God changed my heart about children.
Mm.
And that was even when I was a doula. I didn't want my own kids. I'm like, I'll just help everybody else have kids, right?
What
But he
amazing.
totally changed my heart towards children. And then I thought to myself, okay, you've totally changed my heart towards children, but you're not giving me one, right? But you've changed my whole heart.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, now you've given me a longing.
Yeah.
But I think that was just part of his he wanted my heart to align with his heart on every topic. And
Yeah.
his heart towards children is what it is. And so he needed my heart to align with his heart in that way. But it's funny because I'm the person everybody hands their babies to.
Oh.
And so that's another thing. It's interesting. It's like I'm the one that kids always gravitate towards. So that's another way that the Lord's working on me, because anytime at church or wherever, like they always just, I'll turn around and there's a kid standing there looking at me wanting to, color. And whenever I hold the babies, they'll fall asleep. So everybody hands me their baby. so
That's so sweet.
so I'm just like breathing in their head, like, oh my gosh, getting my little fix, so perfect.
Yeah.
But I am in a good place. I do have my moments. I think the hardest thing, for every woman has their own hard things with infertility. I think one of my most challenging things is this idea of one, being alone when I'm old, even though I think the Lord's coming back before then, but that's another topic. But if he tarries, being alone, because my husband's older than me, being alone when I'm old, and because I don't want to end up in a state-funded nursing home. That's my biggest fear in life. And but also like just not having anyone to pass anything on to, like not having anyone who cares about anything. Like I always think, like, who will I pass anything on to? I think that's when I've hit my knees with tears before, is just thinking like there's no legacy, there's no one to pass anything. And James just reminded me, like, you have Little House Story Corner, you have Little House in the Mountain. Maybe there are legacies you're passing down to other people's families or other people's children that you just don't know about.
Yeah, exactly.
So I try to hold on to that. I try to be an auntie to as many kids as I can. I like sending birthday gifts to them, and I try to connect. I think that's important, to connect with children, to let yourself connect with children, even when you don't have your own, even though it's hard sometimes, but to let yourself do that and have an impact on other people's children. And then those other details, the things that you're worried about, that I'm worried about, I just keep reminding myself, like, the Lord's going to work those out over time.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
You never know, in the future, there could be someone grown up who just needs a mom someday.
I didn't want to say that because, when someone's dealing with a sensitive, painful issue that you don't have experience with, it's like, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Oh no, it's okay.
That was exactly what I was thinking, was like, you really don't know.
You don't know
what's going to happen. It's
you don't know
that irreplaceable element of time.
Yeah. So we can have all those what if this and what if that, but if truly I'm the Lord and he's called me by name,
yeah,
he's not just going to be like, oh, well, for you, Like,
Yeah, exactly.
has that all worked out. And if there's some person someday that needs a mom and I'm available, then maybe that'll be how it'll work out. So I try not to be sensitive. I think we live in a culture where everyone's overly sensitive and you feel like you can't say anything around anybody. So I try, like, people say the wrong thing sometimes, or the insensitive thing. And I just try to let it just kind of, bounce off, because walking around just being constantly offended or sensitive to everything, it's just kind of miserable. So
Totally.
I just try not to be like that with the infertility topic.
Well, that's smart and that's wise. And I'm glad that you're able to be in that place. Because like you said, you are at an interesting point in your fertility with your age where it's like you technically you're not at the end,
Correct.
but you're not at the beginning either. And at the same time, simultaneously, I was just talking about this with a friend the other day because they were asking us about our heads around adoption, because for a long time I thought, okay, I want kids, but I don't want to have my own. And there was multiple reasons for that. I used to think that the world was overpopulated. Within the last like 4 years, I've totally gone down like different data points that have led me to different conclusions where I'm like, whoa, I actually think it might be the opposite. That's a whole separate thing. And, we went through kind of more of a bigger adoption journey where like we were looking internationally, and then we went locally, we went through foster care, and we learned.
Yeah, we got certified through foster and adoption care in our state.
I was going to ask you about that because I knew it was similar timelines for that. But I said to the person the other day, I was like, we're not pursuing that right now, but I've realized that through community, you never know what's going to pop up and who needs a home. Absolutely. And I just trust we're open, that if that's what God has for us, that like, we want to be open. We want to care for the orphans and the widows. And, I feel the same for you, that like, it's going to be interesting to see if you do end up giving birth to children, if you end up adopting. Yep. I just see you as a loving motherly figure in general.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to see what God does with that part of your life in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I think being open to that, open to God's will, is so important. And I do have a motherly heart. I guess sometimes when people are like, you treat your animals like kids, I'm like, well, that nurturing heart has to go towards something, like, like back off. But I don't know what God's will is. And I think that if you have if you have a heart that's open to his will, then it's easier to avoid kind of the idolatry where you're either idolizing, I'm not open to adoption, I want birth children, I'm willing to do anything to get them. You can idolize things that are good things. Totally. So having children is good. But you can idolize that.
Yes.
And then you're not really open to whatever he has for you. And that's something I've had to keep it, you have to keep that in check. Am I idolizing this idea of this where I'm closing myself off to God's voice?
I love that, because I've seen people get upset before when they're struggling with infertility at any mention of adoption, which I can kind of understand that, because it's like, it's not really.
But it becomes an obsession.
Yes. And at the same time, it's like, well, but let's flip this around here. What about the kids that need homes? Like, you're getting upset about this, not you, the theoretical person I'm talking to. And it's like, but what about this baby, whether it's an adult or like they need a mother too. And so it's beautiful that you're aware of that and open to that.
Yeah, really what it comes down to is like knowing that something is actually God's will. Cause like I said, we're certified, right? But until God says this is, like, I'm not just gonna, you don't just go pick a child, because you want to make sure you're really in the Father's will. And so for us not doing interventions, for us not just kind of being emotionally reactive and just grabbing this thing or that thing, it's just sitting there and wait. You just, sometimes it's so hard, but sometimes you have to just wait on the Lord. You have to. And it's so hard, because I get it, because it's like, I want this to happen now and this and that. And we have our ideas about things, but you have to wait on the Lord.
Yes.
So you don't get, because if you get ahead of him, you're just going to go this way, that way. And then,
totally.
and then there's consequences.
Yeah.
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 So
Well,
be
like,
still before him.
yeah, that irreplaceable element of time. I don't remember where I was. It was someone else that said that to me. And when they said it, I was like, oh, that's so good, because I can see so many physical examples in life and in nature where there is literally no rushing it, even if everything is being done right. So that really resonated with me. Like, okay, things could be going perfectly in the right direction, but you still can't fast forward time. And that's great that you've been able for, you know, to sit in that, mostly to sit in that piece of accepting, you know, his timeline.
Mm.
Dude, well, Lee, we could keep talking for forever, but I'll say this in closing. I'm excited for your podcast.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of the work that you've been doing on the internet, just in general. Little Book Story Corner. What is the phrasing of that?
So there's Little House Story Corner and Little House on the Mountain.
Yes. So Little House Story Corner is so cute. Logan is a little too little. He was into it for a few minutes and then got distracted.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I can tell this is going to be right up your alley very soon. Ironically though, that's kind of funny saying that, because when I put on Little House on the Mountain, he really likes that. He likes the visuals and the calming just vibe of the whole video. So
yeah, I have a lot of kid followers where they'll send me letters and things like that.
Oh,
and it's
that's so sweet.
And they, of course, but I mean, they're really watching for Zion and Obi and the chickens. That's why they're really watching, which is fine. But
so
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I just appreciate you, and I appreciate the internet support, support you've been to me over the years, and the times you've slid in my inbox and prayed for me. Some of those times I've like played them a couple of times, and I'll like hold the phone to my ear, and I just appreciate it. And I'm glad that we've gotten to meet through the internet. Like you said, there's a lot of evil potential, but like literally it's also radically changed my life for the better in so many ways. Including exposing me to this whole world of like just slow living and homesteading and connecting with different people. And so, oh, hi, baby.
Zion and Obi, you guys were so good the whole time.
So good. So patient. So is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
I love you. And I'm really just proud of you bouncing back, you know, from everything that went on, and just continuing to, oh, here it goes. It's a meltdown. They're all coming in now.
Great.
And just continuing to live your purpose and share your journey. I think that takes a lot of courage, and it takes, I know, buddy, we're good.
We're almost done, guys. So close.
I love you. I'm proud of you. And I just pray the Lord, you know, bless you and Dan's whole household, and keep you guys, and, you know, lift up his face towards you and give you peace. That's my prayer for you. And I hope he continues to have favor on your channel, to grow your channel in whatever way that he will and would.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Well, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Be sure to check out Lee's channel, all of her channels. I'll have them linked down below, obviously. And that's pretty much it. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.